Welcome to the video on understanding the place value system. Today I'm going to explain what the place value system is and how you can move around easily on the place value system. A couple things to go over about the place value system before we go over some examples and we get in a little bit more in depth. The place value system tells us the value of each digit in a number. So the number 61, the digit 6 is actually in the tens place, and that tells us that it actually has a value of 60. Also, it's important to know that the place value system is a base 10 system. That means that each value is either a multiple of 10 or 1/10, and we'll go over this a little bit more in depth in a minute. And to move up one spot in the place value system then, because it is in a base 10 system, all you have to do is multiply by 10. Conversely, to move down one spot in the place value system, all you have to do is multiply by 1/10, or you could divide by 10. It's the same thing. So let's look at the place value chart. All right, here's an example of the place value chart. You'll see that we're going to start with the ones, and it goes from 1 to the tens to the hundreds, and then we get into the thousands place values. So that starts with 1,000 and goes to 10,000, and then to 100,000, and then we get to the millions. And we start with 1 million and we go to 10 million and 100 million. And this pattern repeats itself forever. So you'll notice that in each section you have 3 different place values: the ones, the tens, and the hundreds. Now the other thing that's really important for us to start to learn are our decimal place values, or we can write them as fractions. So our first place value to the right of the decimal is called the tenths place value. It has a value of 1/10, or as a decimal 0.1 or 1/10. The second one is hundredths, and that is 1/100th or 0.01 as a decimal. And for 5th grade, we need to know out to thousandths, and so thousandths is 1/1000th or 0.001 as a decimal. So let's look at how the place value chart works. One thing that's important to remember is that everything revolves around the ones place value. So if I start with ones and I want to go up one place value to the tens, I need to multiply by 10. In other words, 1 times 10 equals 10, and that's how we get to the 10 spot. Now if I wanted to go from the 1 spot to the 100 spot, I would just have to take my ones place value, multiply it by 100, and that would equal 100. So you can see that I can get to any place value by simply multiplying it by multiples of 10. At first we multiplied it by 10 to get 10, then we multiplied it by 10 times 10, or 100, to get to 100. Now let's do one more going to 1,000. I would do 1 times 1,000 equals 1,000. Or I could say 1 times 10 times 10 times 10 equals 1,000. You see, to get to any place value, all we need to do is multiply by 10 or a multiple of 10. The same thing works if we go down on the place value chart. So if I wanted to go from the ones place value and go to the tenths place value, I would have to take 1 and multiply it by 1/10, and that would give me a value of 1/10, or I would end up on my tenths place value spot, or 0.1. Now when you go down, you can either multiply by 1/10, you can also divide by 10. I could say 1 divided by 10 equals 1/10. So when you go down on the place value chart, you can either multiply by 1/10 or divide by 10. For simpleness in this video, I'm just going to say multiply by 1/10, as I think that ends up being a little bit easier. So if I wanted to go from 1 to 1/100th, again I could take 1 and multiply it by 1/100th, and that's going to give me a value of 1/100th. So you can see one more time that as I go down the place value chart, I'm going to multiply by 1/10 or a multiple of 1/10. So in this case, 1/100th, or I could say 1 times 1/10 times 1/10 is the same thing as 1/100th. Now one more time, if I wanted to go from the ones place value down to the thousandths, I could take 1, multiply it by 1/1000, and that's going to give me a value of 1/1000. Again, it's a multiple of 1/10, so 1/1000th is the same as 1/10 times 1/10 times 1/10. Just the same as 1,000 is the same thing as 10 times 10 times 10. Hopefully you're able to see that I can get anywhere on this place value chart by either multiplying by 10 or multiplying by 1/10. One other thing I want to talk to you about is that you'll notice on the place value chart we go from one whole number to the decimal to tenths. There is no once place value. Please, please, please remember this. There is no once. It's impossible to get a onth value on your place value chart. And that's because if I take my 1 and I multiply it by 1/10, as I did earlier, if I take 1 times 1/10, I get a value of 1/10. It is impossible to get a value of a onth. In fact, if we look, what would a value of a onth be if I wrote it as a fraction? Well, you'd probably write it as 1 over 1. But 1 over 1 doesn't equal a fraction, it equals 1 whole. So it is impossible, and there is absolutely no way you can ever get a onth. So please do not write this down. Now, you do need to memorize all 3 of the decimal place values, tenths, hundredths, and thousandths in order. Also, please notice on the decimal place values that each place value ends up with a THS on the end of it. So it ends up with that tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Whenever you're writing down your decimal place numbers, you have to remember to write the THS on the end of it. So how does this all work when we apply it? Well, let's look at a few examples. If I were to write down a number here, we're just going to make this pretty easy. I'm just going to put in all twos. We would read this as 222,222,222. Then we'd say 222 thousandths. So just to illustrate again how this would work, if I look at my ones place value here, and I wanted to move up one spot on the place value to the tens place value, I would multiply by 10. If I wanted to go from the twos to the hundreds, you're right if you said you'd have to multiply by 100. So to go from 2 to the hundreds place value, I'd multiply by 10 or by 100. Again, if I wanted to go from the 2 to the thousands place value, I would multiply 2 by 1,000, and that would equal 2,000. Or I could do 2 times 10 times 10 times 10. Now, if I wanted to move down the place value chart, I could multiply by 1/10. So 2 times 1/10 gives me a value of 2 tenths. If I wanted to go from the ones place value down to the hundredths place value, I could multiply 2 by 1/100, and that would give me a value of 2 hundredths. So I end up in the hundredths place value. And same thing if I wanted to go to the thousandths place value. I could take 2 times 1/1000, and that would give me 2 thousandths. So I'd end up again in the thousandths place value. So what happens if we have to compare a few numbers? Let's make up a number here. All right, I've made up 2 numbers. We have 45,623 and 47 hundredths as my top number, and 53,680 and 44 hundredths as my bottom number. Now let's compare the size of the 3 in both numbers. So in the top number, the 3 is in the ones place. That means that it actually has a value of 3. In this bottom number, 53,680 and 44 thousandths, the 3 is in the thousands spot. So the 3 in 53,000 actually has a value of 3,000 because it is in the thousands place value. What we could say about the 3's in both numbers, starting with the bottom ones, is that the 3 in 53,680 is 1,000 times larger than the 3 in 45,623. And that the 3 in 45,623 is 1/1000 times as large. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's go over a few more examples of this. Here I have 2 numbers, 5 and 109 thousandths and 62 and 375 thousandths. And in this case, I want to compare the 5's in both numbers. You'll notice that in the top number, the 5 is in the ones place value, and in the bottom number, the 5 is in the thousandths place value. So in this case, the bottom number, the 5, is going to be 1, 2, 3 place values smaller. So this would be 1/1000th the size as the 5 in 5 and 109 thousandths. And conversely, the 5 would be 1,000 times larger than the 5 in 62 and 375 thousandths. Now I want you to try a few problems on your own and see if you can come up with the right answer. So the first 2 problems ask you what place value a digit is in. So the first one says what digit is in the 1/10ths place value in the number 1,652,053 and 984 thousandths. So again, what number is in the tenths place value? And the second one is, what digit is in the 1/1000th place in the number 12 and 51 thousandths? So again, you're looking for the digit in the 1/1000th place. The next two problems ask you to compare the values of digits in two different numbers. So the first one says we're going to compare the value of the 4 in the number 640,327 and 89 thousandths, and ask the 4 is how many times larger than the value of the 4 in the number 22,645 and 25 hundredths. So again, I'm comparing the 4's in both values. I want to know how much larger is that 4 in the first number. In the second example, I want to know what the value of the 8 in 640,327 and 89 hundredths is how many times smaller than the 8 in the number 39,580 and 66 hundredths. Again, I want to know how many times smaller is the 8 in the first number compared to the 8 in the second number. Try to solve all 4 of these, and then when you're done, unpause the video and see if you got the right answer. Pause the video now. Okay, let's go over the 4 problems and see if you were able to get the right answer. In the first problem, I'm looking for what the digit is in the tenths place value. Well, I know that the tenths place value is the first place value after the decimal to the right. So the digit in that place value would be the 9. So 9 is in the tenths place value. In the second question, I wanted to know what digit is in the 1/1000ths place value in 12 and 51 thousandths. Well, I know that the 1/1000ths place value is the third place value to the right of the decimal, and the digit in that place value would be the 1. So the 1 is in the 1/1000ths place value. In the third problem, I asked you to compare the 4 in two different numbers. How many times larger is the 4 in the first number compared to the 4 in the second number? And in this case, the 4 in the first number is 1, 2, 3 place values larger than the 4 in the second number, 22,645 and 25 hundredths. So that means the first 4 has a value that is 1,000 times larger than the 4 in the second number. In the fourth problem, I asked you to compare the values of the 8's in both numbers. The first number, 640,327 and 89 hundredths, the 8 is in the tenths place value. In the second number, the 8 is in the tens place value. So again, I need to move down from the 8 in the second place. I need to move down 1, 2 place values. So that means that the 8 in the first number is 1/100th times the value of the 8 in the second number. 3 things I want you to remember specifically from this video. First, I want you to remember that the place value system is a base 10 system, so that by multiplying by 10 moves you up 1 spot on the place value chart, and that by multiplying by 1/10 moves you down 1 spot. Second, I want you to remember that decimal place values end in a THS, such as tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. And finally, that there is no once place value. It's impossible to get a once place value. And to go from the ones place value to the next place value down on the chart, you multiply by 1/10, which gives you a value of 1/10. Again, there is no once in the place value chart. I hope that this has brought you a little bit more understanding about what the place value system is and how it works. It's important to apply this knowledge as you solve a myriad of different problems using the place value chart.